The plan for today is for me to say a few words of introduction to the course and to the Lau China Institute. Then I'm going to hand over to our esteemed Deputy Director, who's going to give you a little taste of what it might be like were you to come and sit in a classroom with us. And then we're going to hand over to four of our alumni who are going to say a few words about their experience. And then I think we should have time for some questions towards the end, and hopefully we'll be able to wrap up by 4 o'clock. Okay, so my name is Thomas White. I am the program convener for the Master in China and Globalisation. And I want to start by introducing, by pressing the right button, the Lau China Institute. Okay, so the Lau China Institute, in which the Masters in China and Globalisation is housed, is one of the leading centers in Europe, perhaps the world, for the study of China. We are 9 core academics, give or take a few changes, but we also have numerous affiliates working elsewhere in King's and beyond. We are lucky to draw on a whole range of disciplines and interdisciplinary perspectives. We have a particular emphasis, I think, on impact and engagement beyond academia. So we do the scholarship, but we also place particular weight on public engagement. The kind of things that involves include training government officials, providing expert opinions to the media, and developing new ways of disseminating knowledge about China. I'll show you how that's done. So we do scholarship. Here are some of the books that have been published by members of the Lau in recent years. As you can see, a broad variety of themes on offer from our scholars. We also, as I say, engage in various forms of public communication, so appearing on television, writing articles for the media, and so on and so forth. I mentioned innovation, public innovation, innovation in terms of public engagement, and Jane Hayward, one of our lecturers, has this fantastic YouTube channel, which I would recommend to you, as a way of disseminating concise knowledge about China to a broad audience. So that's something we're very interested in. And it's something, one of the things that we hope that you will get from this program is the ability to engage with a wide audience as well. We hope you would get from this program a theoretically informed understanding of contemporary China. We focus particularly on the interactions of economic, political, and social factors. This is very much a master's rooted in social science. We want the knowledge that we make and teach to be applicable, to be state-of-the-art knowledge about Chinese business, economy, state and society, international relations, development, investment, and politics. And I think our course provides a strong foundation for careers in business, public policy, civil service, consultancy, academia, and many more, just to name some of the careers that our graduates have gone into. A little bit on the structure of the course. We have a core module, China in the Age of Globalization, that takes a broad historical view of China's relationship with the outside world in the modern era. We have this dissertation, 12,000 words of independent research that you will conduct under the supervision of a KCL academic on a subject of your choosing. So this is your path to becoming an independent researcher with the assistance of a King's academic who supervises you through this process of writing a dissertation. In order to write this dissertation, you are also equipped with research methods training in a variety of social scientific research methods. So you will come out of this degree having conducted a piece of original research, some of which indeed ends up being published. And you will also have a broad, and in the case of your dissertation, a deep knowledge of particular research methodologies. Yeah. Then we have our exciting range of optional modules. Now, the great thing about being at King's is that we have optional modules that we teach in-house, but you also have access to some of the broad array of optional modules taught in other programs from elsewhere in King's. So we have, at the Lau, we have economic policies and development in contemporary China, doing business in China, environment, sustainability and climate change, modern Chinese political thought, China's international relations, contemporary Chinese society, infrastructure, technology and power in the age of global China, Chinese politics. We also have an internship module, which students often enjoy doing, where they find an internship for themselves and then are asked to reflect on that internship. That's the assess part of that module, but it's a way in which our course kind of sets people up for their careers afterwards. We also, with the King's Language Centre, have offered a Mandarin for Research module, and that is aimed at those who have knowledge of Mandarin and want to develop it in a research context. They want to be able to write about their own research in Mandarin. And having seen students who took that last year and listened to their presentations, I can attest to the competency that that module provides. It's very impressive. And as I say, yeah, they're optional modules from elsewhere in the Global Institutes and elsewhere in King's. Including beginner's Mandarin, that's right. So there are other language center options that include, yeah, more elementary forms of Mandarin for those who haven't had a chance to study it yet. Beyond the classroom, I think we really benefit from being in the center of London, from having access to huge range of speakers that come through the door of King's. Regularly, the Lau China Institute hosts speakers giving book talks, but not just academics. You know, we have a whole range of people interested in China coming and talking to us, and you as students on this course would obviously have access to that. Beyond the Lau, many programs, faculties in King's also put on these kind of talks, which you'd also be able to join in with. As many of you will be aware, this talk today, this introduction, is happening as part of China Week. China Week is our annual kind of flagship series of talks, and we're very proud of that. We're very proud of the range of people that come and speak, and we're also proud of the involvement of students. So through that, you will get access to a whole range of interesting speakers, academics, journalists, business people, and so on. We also offer tailored careers advice and events for preparing you for what might come after. And we organize regular cohort social events. We have regular kind of welcome drinks, end of term drinks, but also we have theme drinks around, theme dinners around Chinese New Year, and so on. So we really place importance on building a strong cohort as well. Okay, I think that is, yeah, if I press the right, yes, that is, thank you from me. If you have any questions about the course, please feel free to email me, or feel free to raise them in our little Q&A session at the end that we will make time for. I'm now going to hand over to our Deputy Director, Dr. Charlotte Goodburn, who's going to give a little taster of the kind of thing that you might learn in a classroom.
So I'm, as Tom just said, I'm Charlotte Goodburn. I'm the Deputy Director of the Lau China Institute. I am also reader in Chinese politics and development, and I teach the optional module in Chinese politics, beyond the headlines, which I really enjoy teaching. It gives me a chance to kind of go beyond the sort of stuff that you would read in the newspaper about China, whether here or in China, or I didn't even touch any of it. I don't know how to move away from the slide change. I really enjoy it because it goes beyond the kind of stuff that you would read in the papers on any side of the world. And we will kind of use news sources to dig deeply into what those stories are really about and what we can really learn from them. And think a little bit about the way that the journalism sometimes misrepresents or underrepresents important issues in Chinese politics. But that's not what I'm going to talk about now. I'm going to talk. Well, this is freaking me out a bit. Okay. I'm going to talk a bit about the core module that you would have to do as part of our program, China and the Age of Globalisation. This is a kind of, it starts as a historical module, and sometimes that unnerves or unsettles people. Then they think, you know, I came here to study contemporary China. I wanted to start it in about 2015. Why am I having to go back and learn all this old dead stuff? Why do I need to bother? So I'm hoping to persuade you that actually you do need to bother, because you aren't going to understand 2025 or 2026 or beyond unless you understand a little bit of this stuff. So the purpose of this module is basically to look at the main course of China's interaction with the global political economy over the past, not 1, not 2, not 5, not 25, but 250 years, with different focuses on different points of that 250-year period, and a lot of contemporary stuff as well. The purpose is to make sure that students are familiar with a range of theoretical approaches to global development, and to introduce students to critical debates about the growth, the development, and the impacts of China's integration into the global economy. And the way that the module is structured is through a series of really big questions or debates, the kind of things that people want to know when they think about China. So right from how does the rest of the world imagine China, going right back to Montesquieu, not in a huge amount of detail, but starting with these kind of old and often Orientalist understandings of China, moving forward in time to, how and when did China and the West diverge? Did they diverge, and how did it happen? We look at the colonial era. What was China a victim of colonialism? And if so, was it bad for China, or was there anything good about it? Coming forward into the Mao era, we reached the 1950s, and we kind of tried to debate about this question of whether China was really separate from the world and withdrawn from the rest of the world, or whether the global political economy and international relations actually had an impact on China in that period. We then move forward again to 1978 in the reform period. What kind of reforms did China have? How did it fit into the global order? Did it become a neoliberal power, as some scholars would have you believe? Maybe. We look at China's model of development since then. Is there a model? Does China provide a model for the rest of the world, or a mode of development that's unique, or is it just reproducing what other countries have already done? What about China overseas? I've had some recent research looking at China in Africa, in Uganda, in Nigeria, looking at these big industrial parks that China is building. We'll also do a case study of Malaysia and look at see how, and Myanmar, and see how China is interacting there in Southeast Asia. Is it a neo-colonial power? Is that an appropriate word? And even if we don't think China is a neo-colonial power overseas, they do that. What about inside China? Can it be an internal colonialist power? What about what's going on in Xinjiang with the Uyghur population? We're not shying away from some of these sensitive topics. How can we understand what's going on there? And how does that affect China's interaction with the rest of the world? So that's an overview of the kind of stuff you'd be covering. And what I want to do now is just give you a little taster of some of the historical stuff that you would cover. This is one of the first things that we would cover in the module, is this supposed question of the Great Divergence, which is basically the question of when did the development of China and of the West diverge. I've put, I don't know if you can see these graphs, they're a bit tiny on this small screen, but I've put these two, oh no, my lovely red thing doesn't work on this screen, because it's an LED screen, but I put these two graphs on here to look at GDP, China's share of global GDP. This first one goes from the year 1, it's a hypothetical year 1, to year 1500. Second graph goes from 1600 to 2010, and I find this absolutely amazing. I remember the first time I saw this graph one time ago, kind of blew my mind, because I had no idea, despite having history, quite a good university, I had no idea that for so long in recorded history, China was doing so well as a proportion of global GDP, right? Look, the yellow line is India, the red line is China, Western Europe is that blue line. It's kind of stagnant for a really long time, and then gradually goes up at around 1500. The US, of course, doesn't really exist in this period. Middle East starts quite well and comes down. But the global leader with this hugely long period is China, well, and India up there as well. And it is only after you get post 1600 that China, it's a bit of a wiggle here, and then this dramatic collapse when, of course, Western Europe rises, and eventually the US dominates as well. So what this graph tells us is that China was a leader in the global economy for a very long time, and that Western development happened relatively late and relatively contingently. So then the question of the Great Divergence, as it's called, is why the development diverged after 1600. And the conventional history that you will learn in a lot of the scholarship is that China was very poor and stagnant right from about 1600 right through to the 1930s. Just nothing was happening. Whereas Europe, of course, was this vibrant market economy, rapid industrialization. You've got the Industrial Revolution, you've got living standards go crazy, and this huge takeoff after about 1800. There have been some challenges to this approach, which we would look at in the module. So in the 1980s, way back in the 80s, Worsky and Brandt said, actually, you know what? China wasn't that stagnant in the 1800s. There was a bit of growth. And in the 1990s, the California school kind of revolutionized the way that lots of people look at this period. Kenneth Pomerantz and others started to say, actually, you know what? This is all nonsense. If we look at the year 1800 and we compare China and the most developed regions of China with the most developed regions of Western Europe, and that is England, they're level. There's no difference. So there wasn't a great divergence from the 60s to 1800. So then that complicates our question. We now have to think, okay, well, we know that they were pretty different around the turn of the 19th century. So when did they diverge? If they were neck and neck in 1800, what the heck happened between 1800 and 1900 to put them so far apart in 1900? So the question then stops being about the age of exploration and the period 1600 to 1800 and starts being about a much later period, what happened then. There are lots of potential answers to these questions. You know, Max Weber, if we go way back to Max Weber, the German sociologist and political economist, and he said the West developed this nice Protestant work ethic, that everybody worked very hard, it got this capitalist economic system, which led it to science and technological advances. And this has been really influential, right? This is obviously a very old kind of approach, but it's been really influential. If we move forward to the 1990s and we look at the historian David Landis, who has been really a very influential figure in writing about global history, he totally agrees with Max Weber. And he says, yeah, individualism, experimentation, new post-Enlightenment kind of rational thought in Europe hugely contributed to Europe's progress compared to authoritarianism and irrationality and despotic arbitrary rule in China. So the message that obviously we take from that is that if you want to develop, if you're a developing country, you need to be a lot more like Europe. Well, that's a bit weird. Because if you were here earlier this week, you will have heard we're talking about tech and economic development, and we heard that Europe is kind of on the floor in terms of tech and economic development. China's kind of, okay, it's having a bit of a slowdown at the moment, but it is way ahead, almost so far ahead that we don't stand any chance of catching it up. Another scholar, Joseph Needham, of course, you should have heard of, I would hope, you know, did this famous study of Chinese science and technology, and he said, China was the early leader for a very long time in science and technological development, but it didn't continue to develop. And that's the so-called Needham puzzle. Why did China stop developing? Justin Ipulin takes this up in his work, The Needham Puzzle, and he said China did not develop modern science. The West did. There was a lack of mathematization and experimentation in China, and imperial institutions, things like the civil service examination system, where everybody learned the Confucian classics, but nobody was really rewarded for scientific experimentation, really determined China's failure to develop in what was the Industrial Revolution period in Europe. But there are problems with this take as well. If we look at Western Europe's development, actually, the takeoff seems to predate some of these inventions like the spinning jenny and this kind of Industrial Revolution. This stuff was going on a bit before we really see science and technology coming to the fore. So again, this isn't an entirely satisfying way of looking at this debate. I mentioned Kenneth Pomerantz and the California school. They come in the late 90s and 2000s and say, no, you've got it all wrong. We need to move the focus away from Western Europe and we need to think about Asia. Andre Gunder-Frank basically said, you know, Europe exploited the Americas to gain a lot of wealth for global domination after 1800, particularly the silver trade. And Europe only did well because of, well, it did well late and only through exploiting other countries. Kenneth Pomerantz, who I just mentioned, and he said, you know, in 1800, China and the most developed parts of Western Europe were neck and neck. He said, the 19th century. We need to look at the 19th century. Britain got very, very lucky. It has accessible coal deposits that it could use for industrialization. And it took this very aggressive foreign policy because it's an island, because it doesn't have all this room that it can expand to around the edge, like China. So it launched a lot of overseas trade. It developed colonization, and yes, it exploited those places in the 19th century, and that's how Europe developed and Britain developed. So we are left with this thought that the big gap between China and Europe is really, really recent. Well, for a long time, China was doing better, then the gap narrowed to the neck and neck, and it's only that Europe has overtaken it really in the 19th century. So we need to think about the 19th century, and we need to think about, okay, was it Western colonialism that is to blame? Did this really damage China to the extent that it sort of collapsed, economically speaking? What about the Chinese state? What about if we look at domestically at the Chinese state? A lot of scholars say that it was very weak, fragmented, crumbling in the 19th century. Is that what caused China's economic decline? Maybe. A lot of these issues, I'm not going to go any further into this, I'm just giving you a taste of the debate. But a lot of these issues that we think, oh, what's the point of talking about the 19th century? You know, I want to know about 2025. A lot of these debates are absolutely critical to understand where we are today. You know, when we think about the global economic system, how do states interrelate? Do we need to have strong states protecting its industries and developing policies, industrial policy we heard about earlier this week as part of China Week? Or do we need to have states that really embrace integration and the global market? Which of these is a better policy, and how has China managed it to do so well until so recently? What is the relationship between rich and poor countries? Is that an exploitative relationship? Can it be a beneficial relationship? How has China engaged with the developed West? How does China now engage with developing economies in other parts of the world? These are all hugely important issues and debates today that you need to know about. So I hope I've kind of shown you why this history, why we start with this stuff, and that we end up with a very contemporary set of issues that we need to understand. That's it from me. If you have any questions, I'll be very happy to answer them. If you go away from here, do what I normally do and don't think of any questions on the day, but when I get halfway home, I think I wish I'd asked that. I'm going to say my email address is on the screen, but it disappeared. It is charlotte.goodburn@kcl.ac.uk. Please feel free to send me an email with any questions, and if I can't answer them, I at least hopefully can direct you to some of them. Thank you.
So we're very lucky today to have 4 of our esteemed alumni with us who are going to share some of their insights. And if you have any questions, you can put them to them. So I guess we'll just go along the row and see what people have to say. Keep it brief. If you want to jump in on anything anyone says, I think that would be nice as well. We'll start with Thomas.
Hi, so I'm Thomas. So I've just finished my master's in the last month at the LCI. And I think the reason why I started was because I wanted more research experience. So I came out of quite a research intensive undergrad and wanted to continue that research. I particularly liked the Mandarin for Research module, as this allowed me to develop my Mandarin as well as develop my research. And it's allowed me to not only develop my Mandarin research, but also English research as well at the same time.
My name's Georgiana, and I also did the course with Tom, so I just finished. And the reason I chose it is because I did Spanish and Chinese at Nottingham for my undergrad, and I did Chinese for beginners, and I found it really fun, so I wanted to carry on. So I found this course, and I absolutely loved it, all of it. I thought all of the lecturers were really friendly, very helpful with anything you need, also very enthusiastic about their different topics, which is a really nice environment to be in. And I also found that my friends doing the course, it was really great to have people coming from very different backgrounds. So we had mature students, we had students who'd done more political backgrounds, students who'd done, well, like me, my course was more sort of arts and humanities based. So I found that it was really helpful to have people from more political backgrounds to also sort of as support, and also to bring different perspectives to the course. I did Mandarin level 4. So like Charlotte said, there are other Mandarin courses available. And I found that very helpful to sort of continue my Mandarin from undergrad. What else? Oh, I also did the internship module, which I found very helpful as well. That enabled me to get some work experience in something related to China. So I did an internship at UK National Committee on China with Tom as well, actually. And that resulted in me you know, getting some experience based on China and solidified that that's what I want to pursue is, you know, working on something to do with China or perhaps doing a PhD of further study, maybe. And also that means I now actually have a job because I'm now working for UKNCC, which is great. It's very nice to have a job. And what else? Yeah, I don't know. I loved it. If anyone's got any particular questions, then happy to answer them.
So, hi everyone. My name is Mariana. I did the master's. I was in the 2023 to 2024 cohort, so I graduated in January, and I studied law previously, and now I'm gonna start training as a solicitor. And yeah, I think I always say it was one of the best experiences and choices. If we focus a little bit on the career side of things, it really differentiated me from, or allowed me to kind of differentiate myself from other applicants when applying for in a very competitive field. And then also during my undergrad, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I knew that I did Chinese law and institutions, and I loved it. And then I came in and at King's, and all of the topics that you just mentioned with these really big debates, I think China is one of those things that you hear a lot about in the news, but if you don't dissect it properly, then going into any field, because I went into law, which is not necessarily very China specific, you can actually have a very informed understanding of how the world works. And for me, this course really opened up my eyes to how the world works. For example, I didn't have an economics background, but then I went into my interviews with a lot of commercial awareness and kind of economics awareness and how these policies affect these really big businesses that my law firm then represents. So I thought that that was really cool. And then in terms of kind of the language aspect, I had for a few years stopped my Mandarin. And then when I came here, it really incentivized me to pick it up again, which I did with the afternoon classes as well. I think I was level 3, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, again, there's all these options to kind of get involved in other things. And I do think that it's what you make of it. You should make the most of the course. There's a lot to do. And then for my dissertation, you have a lot of freedom to do what you want and something that you're going to get a lot out of. So I did mine on international arbitration, which is a form of dispute resolution in China. And then again, that was maybe one of the main reasons why I ended up getting a job, which I agree feels really good to have one. But yeah, so then that was kind of with the academic side of things. And then I was also the course representative for my year. And we did a visit to the parliament. We did events. We also got together. And I was in China in May. We had already finished the course for a year now. And then I ended up meeting with some of our old classmates, which was really nice. So yeah, you do also get to make a lot of friends and hear different perspectives. So that was really nice. But yeah, definitely one of the best experiences for me.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rocky. My Chinese name is Shi Ji. So now I'm a PhD student at Lau China Institute. I'm also a previous student from this master program, but from cohort 2019 to 2020. That's a while ago. So I think what I would share may be less detailed, but more like a broader reflection on the program. So I think for me, I would use Mind the Gap as my main takeaway of attending this master program. First is I think it really helps me to realize a gap lies in the broader society back home in China, between the broader society and me in my own limited social environment. So I think staying in Lau China Institute and in this master program really helped me by communicating with our faculties in different disciplines, where first is for example, I'm someone who really don't know much about business, about economy, but I think it's during that year by taking different modules, and I personally don't care a lot about the international relation, but by taking those modules, I found, wow, those are interesting actually, and it also broadened my eyes. Wow, that's just the young me, naive me, don't care about international relations. But later I learned more, like how the things I care about, like the domestic issues, like migrant worker, the hukou system, the uneven welfare system, how they actually do have something with Chinese export in the worldwide, and how those kind of exports and the price differences lead to some global relation issues. And I think the other gap I realized and also mined by this master program is a gap between different narrative. I have to admit, as a Chinese, after I start my master here, I realized how I perceive my country or things happened around me is hugely different from how people here perceive it. Well, sometimes there are just a misinformation or just a mismatch, but there are also some deep things inside, like a gap. People just don't understand things in the same way. Like for now, I cannot really recall any academic things to give you as an example, but the example I always use is like, just imagine when we say bread. What's the concept came into your mind? Because when, as a Chinese, I eat more Japanese style, adding a lot of butter, milk, sweet bread, but I assume people who from continent Europe, when they say bread, maybe that's just a sourdough. That's how I understand the gap there. Like when both of us are talking about, for example, the labor right in China, people here are understanding it in the form of labor union, your working hour, and your welfare. But back home in China, as ordinary people, a lot of us, when we're talking about labor rights, it's after, I don't say it's not important, but we ask first, it's like, as a labor, can I have right maybe to work a little bit more and get more money? I need more money to support myself and my family. So there are this kind of subtle gap. I found it's actually very important, but only people who have deep experience in both of the society can identify it and can try to be the bridge to let people at both sides to communicate better with each other. Luckily, I think all of our faculties here at Lau China Institute, all of them have great experience in both of these societies and environment. They really helped me to learn how to speak for people in this society as well as back home, to let my cohort back home understand how we are perceived beyond China as well. Thank you.
I think quite a key term that I've thought about whilst we're speaking here is assistance. There's always someone willing to help. There's a really good sense of community on the course, as well as the lecturers. Everyone's willing to help. So this time last year when I was applying for internships, lecturers would help me read my CV, help me write cover letters, and help me even search for jobs to find. And I think in the current kind of job market climate, that was very useful. I think the kind of assistance from other students as well is really useful. When we were writing essays, people would check your drafts for you, people would help you even plan your essays. And I think that kind of community is really useful, especially in a master's program. That also helped me kind of branch out a bit on where I was researching and what I was studying. So I think I came into the master's quite narrow-minded. I knew what I wanted to study. I knew where I wanted to go. I knew what I wanted to do in my future. And I think the first module, the China and Globalisation module, helped me kind of explore a lot of different topics very quickly. And I think if you told me this time last year, this is what your dissertation will be on, I would have said, no, I'm not going to do something like that. I want to focus on this. I want to do a political dissertation. And then I ended up moving more kind of economics, and I kind of never thought I would go there. So I think the community definitely helps with kind of knowledge transfer. Everyone can help in their own little way. And I think that was really useful. Also, the events are really fun. And there's alcohol. So that's always a benefit.
Thanks so much, everyone. I can promise you we didn't tell them what to say, so that was all from the heart. Okay. Well, if there are no more questions, we've gone past the hour. You have my email address. I think you have Charlotte's email address from the previous slide. Please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch. And yeah, we look forward to receiving your applications. All right. Thanks very much.